Serious stuff.
There was a whole load more just arriving.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. And we're live on YouTube as well, for any others who want to watch there.
Excellent.
Can I ask just, excuse me, Andy, for viewers on YouTube, where do you get the numbers? Does it show you underneath the screen, the numbers of viewers for YouTube? Or
it does, and it doesn't really tell you anything accurate at the time. But when it's finished, it's still there, and you get the number that have been in there.
At the end. Ah, brilliant. I knew it was about there somewhere. Thanks, just to confirm that. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, it's 7:30, so we're probably time to kick off. A very warm welcome on what has turned out to be a fairly chilly day after some very, very pleasant weather. It's been a strange astronomical week of ups and downs. We had a series of very, very nice clear skies, which were unfortunately somewhat spoiled by mistiness. And the clocks went forward, which meant we lost an hour of our social observing time. But hey, you can't have everything. Anyway, we've had a couple of clear nights, and tonight's looking good. And anybody who's been looking at the sun over the last while will know that there's quite a busy group of 7 sunspots which are active on the sun at the moment. Or sun, maybe not sunspots, but sun groups. And a lot of CMEs as well heading our direction. So there is a chance we could have a nice aurora tonight. As always, we say there is a chance, because there's also a chance we won't see anything at all. But it will be worth having a look out. So after the meeting, of course, and once it gets dark, go out and have a wee look, and you might be lucky enough to spot an aurora. There's a couple of what they call G-class flares, and usually they produce something. So that would be nice if we could have something like that. It's been a bit up and down as well with the speakers. Unfortunately, our scheduled speaker tonight, Stephanie, she's been struck down with a COVID-related, well, we think it might be COVID-related. So we wish her well, and she's promised to come back and speak to us at a later date, but she can't make it tonight. And Paul has very graciously stepped into the hot seat tonight, saved the show. And Paul was very well known to everybody. Paul is ex-president of the association and our webmaster, and he's doing a magnificent job of hosting these web broadcasts. It's been really, really good. And Paul, as I say, is going to speak tonight. He's going to tell us about eclipses, Paul, about various astronomical phenomena and other interesting things. So without too much more ado, everybody knows Paul. I'm not going to embarrass him by giving him a fantastic introduction, other than he keeps the BBC going for us. So we owe him that as well, if you're a BBC viewer. So Paul, over to your good self, and look forward to your talk.
Okay, right. I'll just share my presentation here, and we'll get this thing. We'll do sound and video, because there's a bit of that in it. And so that's me there, and we'll share that and start that. Right, you should all be able to see me somewhere, and my presentation screen. Is that working for you guys?
Working well, Paul.
Good, good, good. Okay, well, I'm just going to talk about really a bit of a personal journey that I've been on, based on the sort of the theory that the solar system is kind of mostly flat, but not entirely flat, but sort of broadly speaking flat. And what this means is that it's not uncommon that now and then things will pass in front of other things or behind other things. And we'll look at a few of the things that I've seen and tried to see. And perhaps at the end, we'll just look at a couple of things coming up in sort of these events. So first of all, we'll cast our mind back 24 years or so to 23 years to 1999. And everyone probably remembers that that's the last time there was a total solar eclipse visible in the United Kingdom, in a little bit of Cornwall. And I was going to go and see it. And what I did, I just took the day off work about the week before and made no particular plans, which turned out to be a very silly thing to do. But here's what happened, you see. Oh, by the way, I should say that what I'm going to cover is eclipses, also lunar eclipses, occultations, planets, stars, asteroids, the moon going in front of stars, of which there are only 4 first magnitude ones that can happen to: Antares, Regulus, Aldebaran, Spica. used to be possible for the moon to go in front of Pollux, but actually it hasn't happened for over 800 years. And transits of Mercury and Venus and some other things, ISS, satellites, that sort of thing. So here's that 1999 eclipse. And you'll see I've entitled this, hang on a minute, there's a couple of people who want to come in. Right, that's more people coming in. Okay, this was the path of totality. And you see it goes right through just the bottom southwest corner of England there, through Cornwall, Plymouth, and then across into France, a bit of Germany, then Austria, Hungary, Romania, and right into the Black Sea at Budapest, and further on after that. And I sort of considered, first of all, I was just going to drive down to Cornwall, and then the police were saying that, you know, this was going to be so popular that the M5 would be backed up to about Birmingham, and you know, and anyway, the weather was looking terrible. So I sort of had some other ideas about what I might do, and one I considered was getting the ferry over to Dieppe in northern France, just there. And of course, I rang up and said, any chance of going to Dieppe on the appropriate day? They said, no, don't be silly, that was booked out months ago. So then I sort of started looking at other possibilities. There we go. And one I considered was Stuttgart in Germany, a little bit further down the line here. I could maybe get a flight there. So the day before, I started phoning around travel agents, and they said, no, Stuttgart's booked up. Munich? Nope. Luxembourg? Yes, we can get you to Luxembourg for the day. Oh, right. Okay. Well, I can actually, you know, I could see it from the airport. I need to go no further than that. But actually, then they said, well, now this was pre sort of EasyJet and low cost flights and so on. This was 1999. And I said, well, okay, well, should we do that? A day trip to Luxembourg. It says, yes, sir, but now you're not staying over a weekend. So this is obviously business. So that'll be £600, please. So I sort of thought, no, maybe not. So what I did was I went up to Wimbledon, where I lived, and just walked up to the Common there. And one of the things that was good about Wimbledon is that although, of course, the eclipse wasn't total, because it was only 97%, you know, actually a partial solar eclipse. And although that might sound like 97% is nearly 100%, you have to look at it the other way around, that instead of 0% of the sun, you've still got 3% of the sun, and it's still blindingly bright, and you can't see the sun's atmosphere or anything at all. But I did see a very good partial eclipse, because the weather, unlike most of the other places, here was actually pretty much perfect in Wimbledon. So I walked up there with my camera and sort of thought about taking some photos. And these aren't the photos I took. This is what I saw off the TV. People in Cornwall didn't see a lot. Some did. And actually my father was one. He managed to just follow a hole in the clouds and managed to see the corona from Newquay in Cornwall. And that worked well. I tried to take some photos of the partial phase from Wimbledon Common. Of course, now I was, you know, fairly young and quite stupid at that time. And I thought, well, I haven't got a proper filter, because I didn't know much about those things. I have got a telephoto lens and a film camera. And so what I did was I had two pairs of eclipse glasses. And I cut up Blue Peter style one of the pairs of the glasses to try and make a filter for the lens, but I couldn't cover the whole front of the lens. So I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll actually just stick a bit of it in the back of the lens and make a filter that way. So I did that, and I sort of took it out. And while the sun was still uneclipsed, I thought I'll just do a test shot to check this works. Pointed this telephoto 300mm telephoto lens up at the sun, looking through my viewfinder, and then watched a fire start inside the mirror box of my camera as the plastic of the eclipse glass caught fire. And so I gave up the whole photography thing there and have no pictures that I took myself of that eclipse. And here's what I learned from this. One is, don't do that. Don't put a filter on the back of the lens, because actually, although the not all the light is perfectly focused to a point at that stage. It's focused enough. The light cone is small enough and intense enough that will set fire to plastic. But the other thing is to plan out the whole thing a lot longer in advance than the day before, which is what I did for the next eclipse that I went to. So I did want to go and see an eclipse, particularly now having seen this on the TV, and some friends got to other places and saw it, including a friend of mine who did go to Luxembourg, but he drove, which wasn't so bad, you know, but I wanted to see a total solar eclipse. So on the 4th of December 2002, there was an eclipse in a place called Ceduna in South Australia. And Ceduna, I think I can best describe as being 500 miles from Adelaide and 800 miles from Perth, and not near anywhere else. It's right out in the outback. This eclipse path came through southern Africa and then across the Indian Ocean and made landfall at Ceduna here. So we got on an expedition there that was actually run by the Astronomical Association of Queensland. And we went on our own little holiday, me and one friend of mine and myself. We flew to Brisbane, drove down through the Gold Coast, went wine tasting in the Hunter Valley, and then arrived in Sydney, where we picked up another friend, and then we went out through Parkes, where we actually got involved in a full-blown sandstorm, which was an interesting experience, I have to say, and ended up in Adelaide, where we met up with the rest of the crew, got on a coach and went out to Ceduna. So that was good. Ceduna is a little town. It's got a normal population of 2,000, but it had an extra 10,000 people turned up for this. And then when we did all that, we came back to Adelaide, drove down to Melbourne, and caught our plane home from there. So we did a round trip of 25,000 miles for a totality that actually lasted 32 seconds. And absolutely, yes, I would do exactly the same again. So a bit about that. During the day, the weather was a complete mixed bag. You see here actually this picture of the totality that I never intended to take, because I was going to watch my first eclipse, being it was only 32 seconds long. It was 1940 local time, and it was just 8 degrees above the horizon. But actually, enough of the sky cleared at that time that we saw it. People at the other end of the beach we were on did not see it because of this cloud. That really did, just an extra mile or so made that difference. We had a journalist with us, and he had been briefed as to what he needed to do to see the eclipse, except that he forgot, or maybe nobody told him, that when the totality happens, you can at that point remove your eclipse glasses. And somebody pointed out to him 27 seconds into the totality or thereabouts that he was still wearing his glasses. So he did get to see the last 5 seconds when they told him. Some people actually stayed in the restaurant. The journalists actually, we all went to the restaurant in the motel for our tea afterwards. And the journalist asked the manageress of the motel if she'd actually seen the eclipse herself. And she said, well, no, I couldn't, because I had 7 people in the restaurant. And you go, well, why go all that way and stay in the restaurant? I don't know. But that was it. There was a partial eclipse to be seen at sunset, but that was all clouded out by these clouds here. Another picture just from this. Actually, it was only when I showed this picture to an eclipse expert, Dr. Kate Russo, who looked at this. And it's not a very good picture, because you can see by the sort of slightly egg-shaped shape of the moon there. There's a bit of camera shake on it because it was quite dark, and this is taken with a film camera. But she said there's crepuscular rays in this, and there's crepuscular rays all the way through there. And what we decided was that this was near the end of the eclipse, and the eclipse was of short duration anyway. So this dark area here is actually the shadow of the moon on the Earth's atmosphere. But over here, the eclipse is finished. And so, there is full sunlight coming through the clouds there, and hence crepuscular rays. So that's the picture from Ceduna. That's the wheat mill at Ceduna there, and I'm sort of looking out to the Indian Ocean here. So that was that. Now, I did film this And I'll play you the clip. It's not very long at all because the eclipse is only 32 seconds, but there's some great dialogue going on here, and about, the build up to the eclipse and the excitement and all that. And there's one mystery that I still don't know the answer to. If you listen to what's being said, and again, it comes down to this thing of planning. There's a woman here who decides that about 5 seconds before totality would be a good time to take her binoculars out of its box. And you can hear her saying, I can't get the lid off the binoculars. And I wonder if she ever did, but here we go. So there you go. That was 32 seconds of totality that sort of seemed more like 5, but quite an extraordinary experience. And obviously I had to go and see it again at some point, and we'll come to that in a moment. But it turned out that the next eclipse of any sort that there was visible from Scotland. There was an annular solar eclipse in the early hours of the morning, visible from the north of Scotland. So, those who know Jude, there's Jude there, and she was my fiance at the time, and we went up to Scotland, and we went to the beach at Nairn, which looked good, except that, of course, this fog appeared, on the Moray Firth, and that just threw a dampener on the whole thing. Actually, if I had been less focused on wanting to see the annular solar eclipse, which was only just annular along that coast and a bit further north, I probably wouldn't have gone there. I'd have gone up the nearest mountain, and I wouldn't have seen the annular bit of it, but I've seen a very deep partial eclipse. But this one, I'm afraid we have to write off as a failure because the fog never went away, and so we didn't really see anything much at all there. But that was the annular solar eclipse in Scotland of 2003. So after that, the next thing, we managed to get to see a Venus transit on the 8th of June 2004. Now, Venus transits come in pairs, 8 years apart, and then they're 121 and 105 years apart between this one and the next one. So the next one here was 2012, 8 years later, and then the next one is 120 years time. I think, therefore, having seen this one, and I didn't see the 2012 one, it's pretty safe to say this is the only one I'm ever going to see, medical miracles aside and whatever. But we woke up, we were in Yorkshire at the time, and we were headed back towards home. So we were driving to the ferry at Cairnryan. We woke up in Yorkshire, there was a massive thunderstorm when it was cloudy, and then just after the clouds cleared and it all went away. And I managed to take this picture. This is Venus here moving in front of the sun. And here's a picture of me actually taking that picture. And a couple of others that I took at the same time. You can see that one's a bit closer to the edge. This one's further across, and the sky was hazing up during the day. And it really, by the time we got to about Middlesbrough, it had completely clouded out. But we managed to show a few people the transit in various laybys through the North York malls on the way, and got some nice pictures. So that was great to have seen a Venus transit once in my life. But that is it, I think. Okay, well, back to the total solar eclipses, and this time we went to Turkey on the 29th of March 2006, which is to say 16 years ago yesterday. This was a longer totality than the Seduna eclipse. The duration of the totality on this one was 3 minutes 45 seconds. It was actually, if you went to North Africa, it was a little bit more. You could get over 4 minutes by going to Libya. And actually, a friend of mine did go to Libya and got very good results there as well. One of the problems they had there, and he did send, I should have included it, he sent me this fantastic photograph from Libya. That the best place to go and see this was out in the middle of the desert, and the Libyan government realized that, you know, lots of people would be getting coaches out to, you know, this place in the middle of the desert where the totality was longest, and they realized that these people might have certain needs, such as toilets, and so they thoughtfully provided 4. And there's a picture of this magnificently long queue of about half a mile of people waiting for the toilets. But we had no such problem in Turkey because we were next to a bar. So, you know, we had everything we needed there, and a very nice sort of space in the middle of just inland a little bit from Side, a place called Manavgat. And we saw the eclipse pretty well from there. There's some pictures there. There's this is the partial phases here, taken through a small telescope. I managed to take a Meade ETX80, so Meade ETX70 as Jude's hand luggage, actually, which came in very useful. And this is a view just through some bushes where the shadows cast are in the shape of the crescent sun at that point. And that's one of the few good pictures I got of totality. I did make a slight mistake in that when I removed the filter, I used a long telephoto lens and a teleconverter on it. And when I removed the solar filter, I just nudged off my perfect focus a little bit. So it's not quite as sharp as I really wanted it to be. But it was great anyway. And we got a very good view of it all. Little bit of haze, because as the eclipse happens, even in the best sky, you can get a little bit of condensation happen when the temperature drops due to the sun being eclipsed. And there was a little bit of that going on there. But by and large, that was probably the best eclipse I've ever seen. So that was that. We came home, and just less than a year later, we had a perfect total lunar eclipse, which we watched from our garden in Larne. The weather was great for this, and the times were good as well. In that it was a Saturday evening. It all started slightly at just before 8:20. The umbral one, the first contact, i.e. when this bit of the shadow starts here, that was 21:30, and then we're actually into totality from 22:44 through to 23:57. So over an hour of totality, peaking at 11:20 at night, and then it went on and finished in the early hours the next day there. So an hour and 13 minutes of totality. This, you can see, you get the red refraction through the Earth's atmosphere here. Near the edge, you get this bluish tinge, and that's through the ozone layer, which comes out blue rather than the red of the rest of the atmosphere. And then this bit is not in the shadow here and is grossly burnt out in that exposure. So you get to the stage where the moon is completely eclipsed, and that's as deep as it got. Very deep red eclipse. This was a bit nearer the edge. It doesn't quite go through the middle of the center line, this one. So that was near the edge, but it was total because the edge of the shadow is somewhere out, a bit further out here. What I actually did, and what you're looking at here, is a webcam mosaic of 11 different bits of moon all pasted together. I was going to try and make a better job of this, but unfortunately I didn't have the video files for very long, because about a week later, the hard drive that had the video files on shredded itself. completely and destroyed everything on it. But fortunately, I'd saved most of the important stuff to another place. But this was what I managed to do by way of the webcam mosaic. There's a much wider view of the eclipsed moon. This is the eclipsed moon here. This is the constellation Leo. So you've got Regulus and the sort of the head of the lion, the backwards question mark at the front there, and the hind legs of the lion down here. And this is Saturn over here. And I did get some pictures of Saturn while I was doing this as well. But that is the moon down right at the bottom of Leo there. So that was that. Then just a couple of months later, we had an occultation of Saturn. And this is a picture I got here. Small number of video frames from a webcam attached to a 6-inch reflector telescope. And here's the moon, and here's Saturn coming out from behind the moon. You can see Saturn with its rings there. This is I sort of use this picture a lot to explain the sort of it's the Father Ted thing, you know, that this is big, but it's also far away, and this is small, but it's near. And actually, when you sort of take, excluding the rings of Saturn, Saturn is actually 32 times the diameter of the moon. However, it's 4,000 times further away, hence it looks a lot smaller. The moon is just under 250,000 miles away. Saturn's about 1 billion miles at that point. So Saturn looks a lot smaller, despite being actually much the bigger object. So that was the Saturn occultation, which was a great thing to see. Then the following year, December the 4th, we had a Venus occultation. And this took place actually in the daytime. So this is a very short exposure. This is the crescent moon here. And this is the last frame I got of Venus going behind literally the dark side of the moon. Not meaning the far side of the moon, which is what most people mean when they erroneously say the dark side of the moon. Shortly afterwards, Venus was occulted by the moon there. So that was the ingress at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then it came out about an hour and a half later, which unfortunately, it was by then raining and cloudy, but I did manage to get some film of it. Here we go. We're beginning to lose it. And there's Venus. I've got Venus. Here she comes. There is Venus. This is real time, by the way. I haven't speeded this up or anything. That really did just appear like that and move away from the moon quite obviously, quite quickly. Okay, and that was interesting. The most stunning thing about that, maybe doesn't show too well on the video, is how much brighter the surface brightness of Venus is than the moon. Although in terms of magnitude, the moon is about -8 or something at that point, and Venus is -4, because of the different apparent sizes of them. The actual surface brightness of Venus, being both closer to the sun and more reflective, is much brighter than the moon. But very, very obvious visually. Okay, so third total eclipse of this talk, and we went to China. And one of the important things to do, I think, if you're going to travel to the other side of the world to see an eclipse, is to actually make a holiday of it and see, because the eclipse lasts, even this one was the longest of the 21st century, and it lasted like 5 minutes and 40 seconds. So, make a couple of weeks holiday of it by all means. And this, we went to China, and we got onto a tour, because that's the only way you can do China. It's not like, the States, where you can hire a car and drive around wherever you want. They do need to know a bit about where you are in China. So we went on a tour, a 10-day tour of China. And we went to, this is the Bird's Nest Olympic Stadium in Beijing. This is Beijing Observatory. This is obviously the Great Wall of China. This is Shanghai. That's the hotel we stayed in, Haining. And that's the Terracotta Warriors in Xi'an. And we traveled around on buses and 2 internal flights as well. and saw a lot of China in just 10 days. It was absolutely fascinating. We did see certain aspects of it as well, like, you know, the brand new sparkling coal-fired power stations and stuff. And we saw, you know, we drove about 50 miles out of Shanghai, and it's just all the way. It's factory with a block of flats next to it, factory with a block of flats next to it. And the people who work in the factory, they just live in the block of flats, and that is their life. They don't go outside of there. But they tell me that's sort of changing a bit now, because they're demanding sort of, you know, Western standards of life and equality and stuff. And there was actually, you know, there are posh shops in Shanghai as well. And so there is a bit of an inequality thing going on there, same as here probably. But it was great to see China. But anyway, Eclipse Day, unfortunately, was all hazy and cloudy and horrible. And it sort of meant that my photos weren't the same as ordinary eclipse photos, in that you're looking through a Barda filter or similar. I was actually able to take loads of photos just using the clouds as nature's own filter. And these I haven't bothered with a filter. This is a 400mm lens, taking various stages of the eclipse. And I got as close as, I did not see the corona at the totality. The closest I got was this 2 minutes before totality, and that 2 minutes after totality. I also got this rather strange picture. I was just looking up at the sun, and I had my camera trained on it, and I saw you know, a Chinese Airbus or Boeing come flying through. I thought, oh, I've got the button in my hand, so I just pressed the button and got that photograph there of the plane coming past the partially eclipsed sun. So that was China. China was fascinating to see. Eclipse Day, not the best. We did see certain things that were very interesting. We saw it was quite pronounced with the cloud that we saw the shadow come flying across it. You can actually see, you know, it went from light to dark and actually traveled across the sky in just a few seconds, the actual lunar shadow. And we also saw the river bore, which was good, but we didn't see the corona. Anyway, moving on a bit, here's something else that I took actually just locally from Larne. And this was a near miss. This was almost an occultation of Jupiter and its moons. And had I been a bit further south, let's say, and you only have to be as far as Dublin, or, you know, the very south of the island, or, you know, southern England would have been ideal. Then the moon would have occulted Jupiter and its moons a little bit earlier. I didn't catch the closest approach here because of the weather, but it did start to clear. This is about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I managed to get the close conjunction here of the crescent moon with Earth shine and Jupiter and the 4 Galilean moons coming past here. So that was quite an interesting one to see. Another, for some people, it was a totality. Because the Faroe Islands here, and also Svalbard, which is off the top of this map here, which is part of Norway, Spitsbergen, as it used to be called, they had a total eclipse in the morning on March 20th. Just to add to my tally of deep partials, by this point, I'd already seen a 97% partial solar eclipse in Wimbledon, and I was going to see a 93% one here in Larne. Actually, the IAA sort of did 4 different groupings of people. Most went to Queen's University. Some went out to Scrabo Tower. And I had my own little gathering here in Larne, and had a couple of telescopes, and a couple of other people brought their scopes, and we all had nice eclipse glasses, courtesy of IFAS and Queen's University both gave us some glasses to keep things safe. But we got some very nice pictures of that. The Faroes themselves were clouded out, so they experienced complete darkness for a couple of minutes, but didn't actually get to see the corona there. Svalbard did much better up here. There were some great pictures came out of Svalbard, where it's quite low to the horizon, but they did well. This was my best picture of the 93% partial solar eclipse. And actually, there's I have processed this to make the black area black, because this is a Skylux telescope projecting onto a sheet of A3 paper stuck to a cardboard box and angled appropriately to get the image. But what you see here is quite pronounced is if you look at this edge here, that's a very rough edge. And what you're looking at there is mountains and valleys on the moon, actually being showing against the contrast of the fully lit sun. You can't look at this. This is a full bright sun. You can look at it. You can look at the projection on the box, but you could not, even though that's only 7% of the whole sun, it would still take your eye out if you looked at it. So you have to remember that the difference between any degree of partial solar eclipse and totality is enormous. Now then, we've got another total lunar eclipse visible from Larn. Here's Larn up here. So we were in the right part of the world to see that. Unlike the solar eclipses, the thing with the lunar eclipses is you don't have to be in a very specific place, sort of a narrow corridor that's about sort of 50 or 100 miles wide. You only really have to be on the right half of the Earth, and this was perfect for us. And this actually was the night of my birthday, so I was probably staying up late anyway. But this was really this peaked about 2 o'clock in the morning. It was quite a later one than the March 2007 one we looked at earlier. But it was a bit more hazy. The sky wasn't perfect. It was okay, but I managed to get that picture of the totality, and that was actually sort of probably darker red in the middle than the previous lunar eclipse I'd seen there, but still not right down the center line because one side is still brighter than the other. But I got a sort of a time sequence of that and sort of assembled them into a clock phase. So it starts here with the full uneclipsed moon, then you see the shadow creep across the moon here, and then you start to see the red color as the eclipse nears totality, and then it moves around and comes out the other side, and then it comes right back to being uneclipsed again. So that was pretty good. So not quite as clear as the sky was for the 2007 lunar eclipse, but it's pretty good. Now then, only 2 planets transit the sun, Mercury and Venus. The Venus we saw in 2004, and that's that for me, because I didn't see it in 2012, and I won't be around in 21-25. So it's from here on in, it's Mercury Transits, and this we all gathered at Queen's University with a team of Professor Alan Fitzsimmons students and ourselves. Set up a few telescopes, and we actually got about 500 people through there during the day, which was extraordinary. Had a bit of cloud in the afternoon through the middle of the transit, but it didn't spoil the experience at all. It was very good. Here's 2 pictures of the Mercury Transit. This one actually was taken through a refractor telescope, and there's Mercury in front of the sun there. As you see, Mercury is much smaller than Venus. The other comparison that was fascinating for me about this was, if you look at the sunspots that were on the sun at the time, you realize that the blackness of the sunspot is far, far less than the blackness of Mercury. This sunspots are about sort of 4,000 centigrade or so, and the rest of the surface is about 6,000. So that's still a fair glow going on there. They just look black because everything around them is brighter. But when you compare it to the blackness of Mercury occulting it, then it's much blacker. This is a similar thing, only in hydrogen alpha light. This was through a Coronado 60 telescope, and you can see Mercury there. That's not quite so spectacular, really, but what is more spectacular is the sunspots, because you actually see the filaments and what would be prominent. Well, what our prominence is on the edge of the sun here. These filaments, if they were on the edge, they would be like that, because they do actually rise quite a long way off the sun. And of course, they're much, much bigger than the Earth, all these giant bits of fire. So that's a good view of the sun. This is a slightly unusual one. It was sort of a challenge to me to take this photograph because roughly in theory you can't. So I thought I would anyway, and because I did say at the beginning that the solar system is approximately flat, but not quite. And actually, this is one of the more extreme cases of the solar system not being flat, in that as Venus went to inferior conjunction, which is when it's directly between the Earth and the Sun, theoretically you can't see it. But actually, on this occasion, it was about as far away from the Sun by virtue of passing it over the top rather than straight in between us and the Sun. It was nearly 9 degrees away from the Sun. So actually, by photographing it before sunrise, it rose quite a while before the Sun did. So here I am, 6:16 in the morning on the 25th of March, 2017. And there it was, as clear as anything. I just, pointed my, that's shot through, I think, a long telephoto lens, 400 millimeters or something, and you get, that's really a very, very thin crescent, but the atmospheric wobbles mean that it comes out looking much bigger than it really is. But that's Venus at inferior conjunction. This is another thing I've got into in the last few years, ever since I acquired a 4K video camera, really, because that's what you need to do this. And I had to go up to Carnlough to do this, just up the coast from here. This wasn't visible from home. It is one of those things that, the path of where you can see this is only a few miles wide. It happens now and then, and there's a computer program called transit-finder.com. And you look that up, put your location in, and it will tell you when the International Space Station will pass in front of either the moon or the sun. The moon, obviously, at this point. And this was sometime in the middle of the night, about midnight. I went up to Carnlough and I took some video of the moon. I knew the time exactly because the website gives you that. And in this day and age, your phone is, if it's connected to the internet, it's synced to an atomic clock, and you will know when to run your video, because this is about 2 seconds of video here. So each of these is a frame of 1/30th of a second. And what you do is you split those all out into frames and then stack them up. And that's what you get. So I added a little bit of color to this moon because it looks nicer that way. And it's real color. This being rust colored here, that indicates iron. And the bluish color in this area indicates titanium. So that was the ISS Lunar Transit from Carnlough. This is another one. There was another total lunar eclipse on the 24th of January 2019. Now, I did get up early in the morning to see this, by which time you could see where the moon is. You could see it as this sort of pinkish glow. And that's all it was, because it was totally foggy. And so we're fogged out on that. But something interesting did happen. This is a telescopic picture from earthsky.org. And during this total lunar eclipse, there was an impact on the moon here. And, my first thought was that might be a hot pixel or something, because it was just a flash. But it was actually visible from multiple telescopes. So it was a real thing that happened. There was an actual impact that was filmed there, just as a bright flash during the total lunar eclipse. Another Mercury Transit, November the 11th, 2019. Now, we did actually manage to, I managed to see this, and I think most of my friends did. We did actually go up to Divis Mountain to look at it initially. And really, the weather up there was quite terrible. So we had a coffee in the coffee shop there, and I went home. And of course, then on my way home, a certain part of sky cleared, and I got my gear out and set my telescope up by the side of the road and actually managed to get a picture of it. That's the Mercury Transit happening there again. And that will be back in 2032, I think I'm right in saying. And just to compare those two transits, this was the one we looked at before, 8th of June 2004. That's the Venus Transit. That's the Mercury Transit of 11th of November 2019. So that's the two transits compared there. Mercury, obviously, not only further away, but much smaller as well. So doubly so on that picture. Here's another transit. This is the International Space Station going in front of the sun. I just sort of used a solar filtered refractor telescope with a 4K video camera on the back of it, a Panasonic for the interested. There's 53 images at 1/30th of a second each there, so 1.7 seconds worth of ISS pass, and stack them all up, separate them all out first into individual frames and then stack them all up, and you get that. And the shape of the station is really clear there. The atmosphere must have been pretty good there, so I hope to do that one again. But that's the end of the actual events. I'm just going to tell you just some upcoming ones. If you want to see a total solar eclipse, again, it's the southwestern UK and the very southwestern tip of Ireland. You have to go down to Mizen Head or thereabouts. Is 2090, September the 23rd. I'm not making any big plans to be there myself, unless there are huge advances in medicine between now and then. But that's when the next one from here is. So you need to travel around, but there's an eclipse in the sort of northwestern part of Spain on the 12th of August 2026. There's another one a bit further south that runs, the path of totality runs through Gibraltar and across the north of Africa all the way across to Egypt on August the 22nd, 2027. On the 22nd of July 2028, there's a total solar eclipse that goes right through the middle of the city of Sydney, including actually the Harbour Bridge and Opera House. So that's one to look forward to. And then there's another one that runs through Southern Africa and Australia, and it's not related actually, but it is an almost perfect twin of the one I went to see in 2002 in Ceduna. Just 30 miles along the coast from Ceduna, there's a place called Streaky Bay, and that's where the 2030 November 25th eclipse comes ashore, almost exactly the same time of year as well. So that's a few eclipses coming up. There's one more I'm going to talk about. One of the most easily accessible forthcoming total solar eclipses, and if things are, returned to normal enough that this is doable, I'd probably try and be there. This runs right across Mexico and the United States. And I've shown the Texas part here because that's where the part of the United States where the weather prospects are most favorable is sort of this southern part of the United States. In the area of sort of Austin, the center line there is a wonderful town that I have been to before called Fredericksburg, amazing town in the Texas Hill Country. Anywhere along that line, Dallas. It goes up here to Niagara Falls and into Canada along the St. Lawrence River to Montreal is all in the line of totality, although it's getting quite late in the day by the time we get to Canada. But this area here on 8th of April 2024 in Texas, that's quite an accessible place to get to. So hopefully the current events that make travel a bit difficult will be gone by then. It's 2 years' time, so let's keep the fingers crossed for that one. And I'm hoping to see another total solar eclipse again in my lifetime. So that's all I have to say. So do feel free to unmute yourselves and ask any questions.
Well, that was brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Superb history chronology of the last 30 years or so of astronomy. Really excellent. And I know a lot of us have enjoyed some of those events, and it's so excellent to actually have a photographic record of them. One of the bizarre things, Paul, I'm sure you'll remember as well, we actually had an IAA trip to Turkey, and we went to Antalya, and you and I actually bumped into each other
yes.
in a leather factory in Turkey, which was quite bizarre.
Yes, we did indeed. Yeah, yes, I remember that because we were on a separate trip actually. So
we were a totally separate trip. Yeah.
We went with a group from another astronomy group, and they sort of kept themselves very much themselves. So we sort of met up with some other people and did some kind of our own thing a bit. And but they were sort of talking about plans that they had for other trips. And one which did amuse me a little bit, I have to say, was that they wanted to do a trip to Alaska or Norway to see the midnight sun and the aurora. And I'm sort of And you can see, and you can see the problem with this, yes.
The two aren't visible together generally.
That's right. Yes. You'd sort of have to, you'd sort of have to make this a 6-month trip, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's excellent. Actually, it is quite bizarre. Eclipse trips are very strange because there is almost a community of people across the world, and you tend to meet the same people. I mean,
it's quite small, isn't it? Yeah,
it is.
Quite a small community. Yeah.
You get these ultra coincidences going on. I mean, when we went to China again as an IAA group, we were walking through the streets of Shanghai, and we bumped into Terence Murta. He wasn't anything to do with us. He had come totally separately, and there he was in the middle of Shanghai, which is absolutely crazy sort of a thing.
We walked into a restaurant. We walked into a restaurant in Shanghai and met the people that had organised the Sedona trip. You know, they were all just there at the table. It was great to see them. You know,
it's a real community. So it is. Yeah. Actually, there's another eclipse next year, which is maybe interesting. Again, it's very accessible. It's an annular. Unfortunately, it's not a full total one, and it sweeps down across North America.
One, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it looks fairly interesting as well, and as I say, should be quite accessible. Okay,
I've never seen
that was brilliant. And
yeah.
Look, thanks again for stepping in. And
right.
I think we should thank Paul in the usual way. If you haven't got your sound switched on, please feel free to thank him, because he pulled that out of the hat for us, you know. Well done, Paul. Brilliant. So if anybody's any other questions, I'm sure a lot of people would like to know how those photographs were taken, Paul. A lot of them very, very interesting ones.
Yeah.
And I think your point about eclipse planning and eclipse safety, you can't emphasize those enough. Every time we go to an eclipse, we see something terrible.
I mean, I tell those jokes at my own expense, really, because I don't want people to, to miss it like I did, or to set fire to the inside of their camera like I did. It's so I don't mind being, getting a bit of a ribbing myself of people saying, "You did what?" Yeah,
a lot of these things come from experience, I'm afraid, and it's a hard fought experience. Yeah, it's really, really awful. So, has anyone got any questions for Paul?
Sorry? Yeah, go on.
Did the camera survive, Paul?
Well, yes and no. The camera was okay, and whether it's related or not very long afterwards, I went to the Italian Grand Prix, actually, and I had the same camera with me, and it had been okay in the intervening period. But the mechanism that operates the aperture broke. So I could take pictures as many as I like at f/22, but I wonder if I damaged it in having that fire in there, so difficult.
So you couldn't take it at f1, Paul, no?
No. It works the other way.
Alexa, turn the lights on.
Yeah, it pulls the other way, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, when I see Ken there, it brings back a memory of our Turkish eclipse again. That was Ken's first eclipse, and as far as I remember, Ken, and as far as I remember, our eclipse was blighted by these guys in hang gliders who insisted in circling overhead, despite the fact there was a crowd of us underneath the thing trying to watch the eclipse. These guys thought that they would enjoy a much better view from a hang glider, a powered hang glider, so they buzzed around. But when Ken saw the eclipse, he went into raptures. I think it was captured in somebody's video.
It was my own video.
It was one of the wildest celebrations of an eclipse, I think, on record, Ken.
Yes.
We had the same. It was similar. We had a different thing, actually. We were a bit inland from. You were on the coast, weren't you? I think.
Yeah, we were right on the coast. Yeah, we were right on the coast.
A couple of miles inland in Manavgat by the river, and the local kids there started throwing fireworks around during the Totality. So.
Oh, blimey! Ken, was that Bulgaria?
It wasn't. They weren't high up in the sky in the way, But
all right,
a lot of banging and stuff going on.
Crazy stuff.
Every eclipse is. Brown in our party. Remember John Brown, the Scottish Astronomer Royal?
Yes, John Brown. Yeah.
He was great. He was a great guy.
Yeah, we had an eclipse and we had an earthquake whenever we got to Turkey. Now, I didn't feel it, certainly, but, and then we started talking about this theory between are eclipses and earthquakes related in any way? And John Brown, the astronomer royal for Scotland, he just poo-pooed the whole thing. And I said, the last couple of eclipses I've been to, there's been earthquakes, but it just so happens that where we went to see the earthquakes, they were earthquake zone, or where we went to see the eclipse, there was earthquake zones, But anyway,
possible actually, because
you're the common factor, Andy.
I could be, yeah.
Andy, did you in China? Did you see the Qingtang River bore?
We did, and we were totally underwhelmed. I have to say, I put my hand
That was
up
quite big.
for,
That was a
for
big,
2 hours,
big wave.
and there was this ripple that came up the stream, despite Terry's, massive enthusiasm for the thing. I always remember Shelley saying, "Is that it, or is there another one coming?" And I said,
"That's
no,
right. Yeah, that's it. That's it.
That was it." We had all these images of people surfboarding up the river on it, but no, it was just like a little gentle trickle.
Because that was a big one. Because at that time, you have got, the sun and the moon in as straight a line as they'll ever be. So pulling in the same direction. So
that's true. Yeah, seriously.
Paul
completely poo-pooed it, I can assure you. But anyway,
Paul, can I ask a question?
Go on.
What did the ancients, or what did people who didn't know before astronomy really kicked off, but before they began to realize about the Newtonian, model of the solar system and the Copernican model of the solar system, what did they think these eclipses meant, or was
this was the wrath of God in certain cultures. They've been really bad people. And where it got worse, actually, is when science knew about it a bit, and those people who knew this was likely to happen, could threaten native tribes and stuff, by teasing them about it, and then it happened, and that was, then they handed over the goods or whatever they were supposed to do.
Rich people, yeah, my goodness. But a little knowledge. But it is fascinating because it was terrifying for people who were primitive and less knowledgeable, and scared by all these natural phenomena, natural things like comets and stuff. It is. I've never seen one. I've never been in the total eclipse. The partial eclipses certainly, but I would love to see a total eclipse. Yeah. But it must be quite an experience.
It is actually. Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is.
I was totally overwhelmed by the thing, and even actually watching the footage back now, I'm kind of quite, it sends a bit of a tingle down the spine, sort of thing. Go, oh yes, that day by the beach in Sedona, where it was only 32 seconds, but it's actually kind of profoundly affected me a bit. It's because it is. It's sort of like, how is this possible that anyone knows this? It's who worked that out, and how do they do it?
I heard, Paul, I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard people saying that during the actual, when it blacks out, the birds stop singing and insects stop chirping, and it really is quite an awesome thing of nature.
And actually,
flowers close up.
Although I will generally say it is not worth going to see a 90+% partial eclipse, even though I've seen 2 of them.
Yeah.
The thing that you do get is the change in the bird song and whatever, and also the temperature drops.
Yes.
Even at that point, you get a temperature drop. More so with the totality, obviously, but even with it, eclipses in the 90s%, you get temperature drop and change in animal behavior.
And there's a change in I don't know if it's a type of polarization or whatever, but the nature of the light also changes.
It does for 2 reasons. It does for 2 reasons. Right. One is that it becomes closer to a point source, and so shadows become harder. But the other is that because it happens so slowly, your brain doesn't register that it has got as dark as it has, because you've followed, your light adaptation has kept up with it. But your eye is still not seeing full daylight, and so actually the color starts to go.
That's right.
Yeah,
and becomes very harsh.
That's right. Yeah, the shadows are very harsh because it's a point source.
Right.
So it is a different type of light as well, eclipse light.
Right.
Read Kate Russo's books. She's gone into all that in great detail, and she's a psychologist by training. So
And it's also got 3 of my eclipse photos in it, which is something to be recommended. That's a selling point. Actually, when we went to the last American eclipse, there was a guy studying the temperature drop, and bizarrely, the temperature doesn't drop. It does drop, but not as much as you might anticipate. You do feel cold, but it's more a sensational thing on your skin.
Yeah.
There was a PhD student there doing some sort of experiment and all the rest of it. So the temperature drop is actually notional. It's really the light.
I didn't realise that, because if you'd asked me, I said it definitely got colder.
Yeah, he had all this mathematics to work out the amount of temperature the air would need to experience to even experience a single degree drop in temperature, and it just didn't happen because the eclipse shadow passes very quickly, as you know, and it doesn't hang around, so the air doesn't get chilled at all.
But everybody had goosebumps.
It's more a sensational thing than a temperature drop, but it gives you the impression that you're gradually, as the moon, as the amount of the moon passes across the sun, you do feel as if you're getting cooler and cooler. But it's a sensational thing.
I was asked for a quote at one stage, and so I made one up. I did a Boris and made one up. And I said it felt fantastic. I said I felt that with the sun, the moon, the earth, and me all in a straight line, I was at the centre of the universe.
That's true. Yeah.
And so you are, apparently. Apparently, according to Einstein, etc. Apparently, you are.
Yes.
But that's another story. Good grief, fascinating stuff. I would love to see one. Definitely have the plan to see one of these, even if it's as you said, Paul, a 93 or 97%. It's a hell of an improvement on the percentage of the ones I have seen. Put it that way. So,
but it's not much different. Even seeing half of one or 90% of one is not hugely different. But that last percent is hugely different.
There were partial ones about. Is it 2014, I think, wasn't it a fairly good partial one? I think it was. So 2014.
Was that the March 2015 one?
2015, possibly, yeah. We had the school out and we were...
Andy, is that the one where you went on an aircraft?
No, that was the Faroes one.
That was
where I went on the fast jet. It was March 2015,
Have you not done the couple things, Andy?
Sorry, no, only did it once, Ken. I could only afford to go. I had only one house to sell.
Only one wife to sell.
Extremely expensive, but it was worth it. It was like going into space. I must be honest, it was fantastic. It was good trip. No, so far I've had 11 eclipses, and I hope to go to the one next year. It's an annular one. I've already seen an annular one in Spain. It was very nice. Each one's different. Each one brings its own wee tricks. But it's an excuse to go somewhere different more than anything else. People say if you've seen one, you've seen them all. Well, you haven't. Actually, they're all different, and they're all pretty spectacular. So I reckon
they are all different, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah, and people count the number of seconds and minutes they have in the moon's shadow because it's quite a rare thing to have. So I think I counted mine up as about 15 minutes, which isn't that long. For 11 eclipses, they spend 15 minutes in it. It's not really great, but anyway.
That's good. Mine's about 9. Mine's about 9.
Yeah, that's pretty good. And we missed the one in China. That's the only one we've missed out of the 11. Most of them were pretty short. And the one in China was going to be like 7 minutes or something. It was going to be the longest one of the whole lot. And like yourself, Paul, we saw it right up to the instant before totality. And
but
right
you're
after
still in the shadow,
Andy.
Andy, you're still in the shadow, so technically you can still count it.
That's true.